Colin Cowherd just reignited the biggest debate in women's basketball. And this time, he didn't hold back. On one of the biggest sports shows in America, he looked straight into the camera and said what Caitlin Clark fans have been arguing for weeks. The Indiana Fever don't just have a system problem, they have a coaching problem. According to Cowherd, Caitlin Clark doesn't need small adjustments, different rotations, or another team-first explanation. She needs a coach who fully understands how rare her talent really is. A coach willing to build an entire franchise around a once-in-a-generation superstar instead of forcing her into a slow, outdated system that limits everything she does best. And the moment that pushed this conversation into overdrive came after Indiana's heartbreaking double overtime loss to the Washington Mystics. For 3 quarters, Clark struggled badly under relentless defensive pressure. She looked frustrated, trapped, and completely out of rhythm. But in the 4th quarter, everything changed. Caitlin Clark exploded for 17 points, buried 5 massive threes, erased a 9-point deficit almost by herself, and dragged Indiana back into the game when it looked completely over. It was one of the most electric stretches of basketball Fever fans have seen in years. But after the game, when reporters asked head coach Stephanie White about Clark's incredible comeback performance, fans were stunned by the response. Instead of directly praising Clark, White shifted the conversation toward team resilience and collective effort, never truly acknowledging the superstar who carried the comeback. That decision immediately ignited backlash online. Fans accused White of refusing to fully embrace Clark as the face of the franchise. Others pointed to what they viewed as a growing pattern. Caitlin Clark delivers superstar moments, yet the praise often gets redirected into generic team-focused answers. And that's where Colin Cowherd stepped in. Cowherd compared Clark's situation to Michael Jordan early in his NBA career, a transcendent player still waiting for the right coach to unlock championship-level success. His argument wasn't that Stephanie White is a bad coach. It was about fit. According to Cowherd, Clark is at her best when the offense completely flows through her hands. Fast pace, full control, constant decision-making, the freedom to create chaos for defenses every possession. Trying to force that kind of player into a balanced everybody-eats system may actually weaken the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league. And fans believe the tension is starting to show publicly. New sideline footage appearing online seemed to show Clark visibly frustrated during conversations with the coaching staff, fueling speculation that the relationship between player and coach is becoming strained only 4 games into the season. At the same time, attendance questions are starting to emerge. Critics online pointed to thousands of empty seats during recent Fever home games, something almost unthinkable considering Clark's historic popularity entering the league. Now, the pressure surrounding Stephanie White is reaching another level entirely. Because this debate is no longer living only on social media. National sports media has officially entered the conversation, and every coaching decision from this point forward will be dissected under a microscope. Can Stephanie White adjust the offense and fully unleash Caitlin Clark? Or is Colin Cowherd right that Clark ultimately needs a completely different coach to maximize her championship potential? That question is quickly becoming the biggest storyline in the WNBA. The deeper this situation gets, the more divided the basketball world becomes. Because underneath all the headlines, viral clips, and emotional fan reactions is a much larger argument about how generational athletes are supposed to be handled when they arrive in professional sports. And Caitlin Clark is no longer being treated like a normal rookie or even a normal young star. She has become the center of the entire league's economy, media attention, ticket sales, television ratings, sponsorship growth, and online conversation. Every arena reacts differently when she walks into the building. Opposing crowds boo her like a villain while simultaneously paying premium prices just to witness her play live. Television networks reorganize schedules around her appearances. Sports debate shows spend entire segments analyzing her turnovers, her shot selection, her body language, and now even her relationship with her own coaching staff. That kind of pressure changes everything. It changes how teammates react. It changes how coaches communicate. It changes how front offices build rosters. And it absolutely changes how fans judge every single decision being made around the franchise. The Indiana Fever are discovering that reality in real time, because for years professional sports organizations could quietly develop young players away from constant national scrutiny. A rough stretch in May would barely register outside local media markets. Coaches had time to experiment. Players had room to struggle privately. But Caitlin Clark does not exist inside normal sports conditions. Every game now feels like a national event, and that means every mistake becomes a headline. When Clark struggles offensively, critics say she is overrated. When she scores 30, critics say she shoots too much. When Indiana loses, the coaching staff gets blamed. When Indiana wins, people debate whether the system helped her or held her back. The environment around the Fever has become emotionally exhausting because nobody is evaluating this team like a typical rebuilding franchise anymore. They are evaluating them like a championship contender that already possesses the most important piece. That changes expectations overnight. And honestly, some of the frustration aimed at Stephanie White is not even really about basketball strategy. It is about emotional ownership. Caitlin Clark fans feel personally invested in her success in a way that very few athletes ever inspire. They watched her transform college basketball into a national spectacle. They watched sold-out arenas follow her across the country. They watched television ratings explode whenever she played. They watched little girls line up for hours just to catch a glimpse of warm-ups. So when those fans now see Clark standing in the corner off ball while the offense stalls, they do not interpret it as a normal tactical decision. They interpret it as wasting greatness. That is why the reactions have become so intense. And to be fair, there are basketball analysts who strongly disagree with Cowherd's criticism entirely. Many longtime coaches argue that Stephanie White is trying to build sustainable winning basketball instead of simply creating highlight reels around one player. Their argument is simple. If Indiana becomes too dependent on Clark dominating every possession, the offense becomes predictable in playoff settings. Opposing defenses will trap relentlessly, force the ball out of her hands, and dare other players to beat them. Those analysts believe White is attempting to develop a system where multiple players can initiate offense, reducing pressure on Clark while helping the entire roster grow together. From a pure coaching perspective, that logic is not irrational. The problem is that fans are not seeing the rewards yet. Instead, they are seeing long offensive droughts. They are seeing Clark visibly frustrated. They are seeing chaotic late-game possessions. And perhaps most damaging of all, they are seeing moments where Clark looks hesitant instead of instinctive. That hesitation is what alarms people, because one of the defining traits of every truly transcendent athlete is freedom. Steph Curry changed basketball because Golden State empowered him to play differently. Patrick Mahomes transformed the NFL because Kansas City built around his improvisation instead of restricting it. Michael Jordan reached another level when Phil Jackson designed a system that balanced structure with Jordan's natural dominance. Fans watching Caitlin Clark believe they are witnessing the opposite approach. They see a player constantly being asked to slow down, organize, reset, and distribute rather than attack relentlessly. And every time Indiana loses a close game, those frustrations intensify. But there is another layer to this controversy that almost nobody wants to openly discuss. Jealousy. Not necessarily inside the Fever locker room specifically, but across the larger ecosystem surrounding women's basketball. Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA with more fame, more media attention, and more commercial power than many established veterans spent entire careers trying to build. That reality created tension from the very beginning. Some players welcomed the spotlight she brought. Others clearly resented the imbalance of attention. And fans have started interpreting almost every interaction through that lens. If Clark gets criticized, supporters claim the league is targeting her. If officials miss calls, supporters say she is being treated unfairly. If teammates struggle, fans accuse them of holding her back. If coaches emphasize team basketball, critics accuse them of suppressing her stardom. Whether those accusations are fair or not almost becomes irrelevant because perception has already taken over. And perception is powerful in professional sports. Right now, the perception surrounding Stephanie White is deteriorating rapidly. Fairly or unfairly, she is increasingly being portrayed as the coach standing in the way of Caitlin Clark's full takeover of the league. That is an incredibly dangerous narrative for any coach. Because once fans emotionally decide that a superstar and coach are incompatible, every future problem gets blamed on the coach automatically. Lose a game? Coaching issue. Bad rotations? Coaching issue. Clark shoots poorly? Coaching issue. Locker room tension? Coaching issue. Attendance dips? Coaching issue. It becomes nearly impossible to escape. And what makes this situation even more volatile is the fact that Indiana's front office understands exactly how massive Caitlin Clark's business impact truly is. This is not just about wins and losses anymore. This is about television contracts, merchandise sales, sponsorships, arena revenue, national exposure, and the future economic direction of the entire league. Clark is not simply a player. She is a financial engine. That reality creates enormous pressure on ownership groups to maximize her visibility and success as quickly as possible, which means Stephanie White is coaching under conditions almost no WNBA coach has ever experienced before. Every substitution gets clipped online, every quote gets analyzed, every facial expression becomes social media discourse, and every loss feels 10 times bigger because of the expectations surrounding Clark's arrival. The irony is that this entire debate may actually be happening because Caitlin Clark is too good too early. If she were averaging modest numbers quietly on a rebuilding team, nobody would care about offensive philosophy in May. Coaches would have time to experiment without national outrage. But Clark flashes brilliance so frequently that fans already see championship potential right now. And once fans believe greatness is already available, patience disappears. That is exactly what is happening in Indiana. People no longer want development. They want domination. They want 30-foot threes in transition. They want fast breaks. They want no-look passes. They want chaos. They want spectacle. They want the feeling they experienced during Clark's college career when every game felt completely unpredictable. Most importantly, they want the organization to fully surrender control to her creativity. Stephanie White, meanwhile, appears to be trying to balance entertainment with long-term team structure, and those two goals are beginning to collide publicly. The next few weeks could determine everything, because if Indiana starts winning consistently, much of this controversy disappears overnight. Winning erases tension better than any press conference ever could. Fans forgive experimentation when banners eventually follow. But if the Fever continue losing close games while Clark alternates between brilliance and visible frustration, the pressure will become unbearable. National media personalities like Colin Cowherd are only the beginning. More analysts will jump into the debate, more former players will offer opinions, more clips will go viral, more fans will pick sides, and eventually ownership will have to decide whether the current coaching approach truly aligns with the future they envision around Caitlin Clark. That is why this story feels so explosive already despite the season being only a few games old. Everyone senses the stakes, because if Caitlin Clark eventually becomes exactly what many people believe she can become, the defining superstar of her generation, then the coach who unlocks that version of her could become legendary alongside her. And the coach perceived as limiting her, fair or unfair, history can become brutal. The most fascinating part is that Stephanie White still has time to completely change the narrative. One successful adjustment could shift public opinion immediately. Imagine Indiana suddenly playing faster. Imagine Clark consistently controlling late-game possessions. Imagine the offense spreading the floor properly and allowing her to attack downhill without constant congestion. Imagine post-game interviews where White openly celebrates Clark's